Hey everybody, it's Alex Miller Acapnion here. I think it's probably under discussed that whatever kind of AI future is coming, dream or nightmare, for a lot of businesses, it's going to be something that you buy from a vendor. And to see that this is true, you could just start by observing that, well, where does software come from now? Of course, companies build their own applications, especially larger companies, especially technology focused companies, but you buy a lot of software from vendors. And if you get into the reasons why you don't build all of your own software, lots of them are more true about AI. There's just not a whole lot of talent out there in certain bottlenecks. You need a lot of specialized hardware potentially. And that's not even really the point I would like to make here, other than you shouldn't expect there's anything about AI that somehow it's going to be something you totally build inside your organization all the time. In this video, I'd really like to talk about the anatomy of a particular super common type of not great enterprise software purchasing decision I bet everybody's had affect their life at some point. And then hammer on one of my important themes, which is that AI is not super easy to measure in an objective way, whether it's good or bad. So why do I say that it's hard to measure whether it's good or bad? Especially if you're talking about things like large language models, and it's probably going to be true of whatever the descendants of these large language models are, that they're really flexible and they do all these different things, but that means how exactly do you quantify what's doing a good job? You may have seen me elsewhere talking about, well, there's all these metrics out there for LLMs and these are the problems with them. But just very broadly, how do you evaluate something that could be a poet? How do you evaluate how it's going to handle every different possible type of conversation? If you look at people, you can certainly say, well, I feel like this person has high social intelligence and this other person doesn't. But people are not exactly one-dimensional in this way. And sometimes it's true it can be a cultural thing. One person will have a particular sense of how to talk to another particular person. And, maybe it's two weird nerds that everybody finds awful, but if you know the secret handshake mentioning the right Star Trek, the original series episode, then everybody's happy and somehow things are smooth again. So it's just very difficult to one-dimensionalize anything really all that well. And as AI more and more approaches this kind of fantasy of resembling the cognitive abilities of humans, whatever those are, it's going to get more and more slippery to say exactly which ones are good and which ones are bad. On to enterprise purchasing decision. And enterprise, I guess I just mean it's just a real big organization and you're buying a piece of software that a whole lot of different people will use. These kinds of decisions are tough. Decisions at big organizations that affect a lot of people are tough. Inevitably, a lot of the people, all of the people making the decision are not going to be exactly the people using the software. And what inevitably happens, and it's not all bad, the world kind of has to be this way, is you collect information from people about what does it need to do, what kind of features does it need to have. At some point, you probably end up with something that looks like a spreadsheet that has a bunch of boxes you need to tick. Does the vendor's software do this? Does it do that? And hopefully you find something that ticks all the boxes and is the right price, and you feel pretty good about the vendor in whatever way you need to feel good about them, and you buy the software. How does this go wrong? Well, there's a whole lot of subtler ways that would be more obvious to you if you're a direct user that this piece of software is somehow a nightmare to use. So I think it's interesting. If you didn't know what a car was, cars had just appeared for the first time, and you were using this kind of method, you ended up with a spreadsheet of, well, I wanted to have 4 wheels, I wanted to have air conditioning. At the end, there's a lot of room. There's a whole lot of cars that fit this description, and there's a whole lot of room to buy different cars, and maybe in the end you make a decision on price. Maybe you make a decision of you just feel good about, well, this other company is a big company, they've been around a long time. And you could just buy a real jalopy car because all the cars had the cup holders you wanted, and there was no room for the person that was going to have to drive the car to do a test drive and say, this thing's a nightmare, I don't want to drive it. Returning to AI, I see some pretty real danger that you could get a real exotic turbocharged version of this problem. Exactly because these newer, fancier AIs are much more flexible. They do a lot more things. And it's much more unrealistic to one-dimensionalize and compartmentalize judgments of if they're doing a good or a bad job. And I see tons of room to make decisions in this way, and the LLM you bought, in a sense, it might not be an LLM, but it's a good conversation piece. The LLM you bought, in a sense, is a kind of weird, hard to deal with, sassy, unhelpful LLM, or some other kind of problem. And just the subtle aspects of what kind of personality your chatbot was showing to your customers or similar was just too subtle for ticking boxes on a spreadsheet. This is something worth thinking about, and I don't profess to have perfect solutions, but I think some of the purchasing dynamics I've discussed will be familiar to all of you out there. And I would like to keep saying over and over again to respect the increasing subtlety of deciding what is a better and a worse AI. Something to keep in mind.